Shalom, shalom, and welcome to what are we doing? Wisdom and Torah Talmudim. We're trying to meet every other week, and someone like Daniel could not make it this time around, and RC couldn't be here because we have some already things planned ahead. But we are going to talk about questions and answers today. I'm hoping that the people would come in and ask the questions. They've been asked about it. And, when we study a lot of the stuff that we're looking into, when we try to share with you what we're trying to learn, is understand that we are doing our best to try to share with you the best context that we have. And if you haven't heard it before, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work, that it's not true. It's just that we're trying to introduce certain principles and context. Give us 1 second, guys.
It's coming on.
Okay.
Coming on.
So, it's one of the things that I want you to be mindful that when we introduce a topic like imperial cult, or we introduce a topic like, like first century context and, ancient Near East or cosmology, we're not doing the normal, run-of-the-mill teaching like Sabbath is Sabbath and Sunday is Sunday. I mean, if after 10 years the Sabbath is the day that the Lord has chosen, then there's nothing we can do. No joke. I mean, really. If you don't know already that the Hebrew name of Yeshua is Yeshua, then there's nothing else I can teach you. I mean, those are the basic introduction stuff. And we have different roles in the kingdom, and we know that everybody has different places. So, Matthew and guys, say hello. Say hello as you come in, okay? So Matthew, Tyler, and Ryan, go in and say hello, and then we get into this.
Shalom, everybody. This is Matthew over at Founders and Truth Ministries.
Tyler?
Oh, sorry, I was getting my mic muted. Hi, Tyler. I'm back after many weeks in internet limbo.
And shalom, everyone. I'm Ryan White here. It's showing up on mine.
It is?
Yeah.
All right, guys. So, okay, so what we're going to do today, we are going to, we want to be able to share with you some questions and answers and give you the best answers that we can give you. Again, we're not trying to let you know that we have all the answers, or that our answers are the only ones, or that, have everything right or anything figured out. We're done. We're trying to search and investigate. And one of the things that I tell the guys is, if we study something and we are wrong about something, we fix it and we make it better. So we're not here to push any on our agenda. We just want to share some of the questions that we have and trying to answer some of the questions. So the first question that I would ask the panel. Well, ask the panel. I'm going to have some questions that people sent me in already. I think they're very good. So we're going to address those. Question number 1. Does Yeshua's sacrifice nullify all the purity laws, such as the Nidah, etc.? Who's taking that one?
I can take it.
Go ahead.
Okay. That is a question that we've got to kind of understand a lot of the first century context, what was going on in the first century world, and why today that people would even be asking that question. Rabbinic Judaism really did not exist in the first century, right? Rabbinic Judaism came about after the fall of the temple and everything like that, and in the first century, kind of where it came from was Pharisaic Judaism. And in Pharisaic Judaism, they were very big at taking temple purity laws and applying them to everyday life scenarios, right? So the question was, did Yeshua's sacrifice nullify all the purity laws? Well, was he offered up as a sacrifice for purity? No, not in that sort of context. But think about this. Think about in the first century world. What if you lived in Babylon and you went into your period of Nidah, or let's say that you gave birth to a child and you're in Babylon. How realistic do you think it was for you to actually travel to the temple and be purified from that sort of an impurity. Not very realistic. It took at least 4 months. And you'd have to travel in a caravan of at least 5,000 people just to be protected along the road, right? So when we look at the historical reality, we start to realize these purity laws really are focused around the temple. Why is that? Because the temple is the house of God, and when God is dwelling in the midst of his people, he has to have his honor preserved, right? And so the instructions in the Torah, such as the purity laws, are really about preserving the honor of God through not allowing these physical impurities or impurities caused by sin to taint the tabernacle. But if you live outside of the land, right, you still can observe these sorts of things, but you physically could not come. Most people were slaves. Most people couldn't even, I mean, how many of you could afford to take 8 months off to travel to Jerusalem to offer up a sacrifice? Back then, 40% of the population were slaves. They didn't even have the choice to go out and perform these things. So, you know, the reality is that people back then had understood these laws to only be applicable when you're living in Judea, because you're actually defiling the temple when you're in the land at that point in time. So Yeshua's sacrifice isn't even necessary to nullify these sort of laws, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, one of the things is that you need the paraduma, the red heifer sacrifice for sanctification. We know that Yeshua is a type of the paraduma. That's why Paul says that he was sprinkles sprinkle blood upon us like indexing. You know, and also the book of Ezekiel says that he will sprinkle clean water on us. That's the language of sanctification. But what we're dealing with here is for redemption. Remember that we have been redeemed. Okay? The sanctification process has not fully come to pass. That is the hope. That is the blessing that we have to be able to go in the temple in the millennial reign, and we are people, strangers from the covenant, have come near through the blood of Messiah, and then he will sanctify. In other words, when it talks about the Nidah and all the sanctification, like for example, we have people doing Nazarite vows today, and that makes no sense. You cannot be in a Nazarite vow today because it requires a sacrifice. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you what it requires. If you touch anything unclean, you have to bring a sacrifice to start the Nazarite vow all over again. So don't we live in an unclean society right now, away from the temple in Israel? Yes. So you will be then that means that you were already defiled, and you have to establish the Nazarite vow over again. So a Nazarite vow, you have to bring an elevation and a sin offering, and the sin offering is chatat, which means consecration offering. Consecration. All it is to restore. It's basically to allow you to be in consecration. This is for the asham. If you touch anything, a nazir who sustained defined corpse, okay, impurity during nazir period. So if a nazir in a Nazarite who wants to be in the Nazarite vow now, for some reason he is in the main.
Oh yeah.
If he touches anything unclean, that means that he is unclean. He cannot continue it. So you touch anything unclean, sin, or you touch somebody with impurity or whatever, you're unclean. So you have to bring an animal. You have to bring a sheep. Okay, you find that in Numbers 6, verse 12. Okay, an elevation and a sin offering. Okay, now to do a Nazarite vow, you need to bring. Let me go. Let me go here real quick, because I want to show you what you need to do. You got to bring. Remember that Paul was told to take a Nazarite vow for him and for other people. Okay, so a Nazarite offering, you have to bring a completion of it. You have to bring a sheep, or a pigeon, or a dove, if you didn't have the money for it. Okay, and we became impure through a corpse or intentionally. You have to bring those things. You have to bring 5 lambs, 5 mincha, 5 chata'at, sin offerings, and 5 shelamim, peace offerings. All of that just to initiate it. I mean, to complete it. When Paul completed the Nazio, he needed to bring all those animals for all the people that he was doing with. That's a lot of animals. So obviously, if you cannot bring a sacrifice to the temple, you cannot take a Nazarite vow. Okay? So this is really important that we understand. That's only one example.
I've got something to add there too that I was just remembered. When you go to sorry about that. When you go to Acts 10, right, in Acts 10 verse, I believe it's in 28, where Peter has, Acts 10 verse 28, where Peter's had his vision. He's thinking about this vision about these unclean animals, right? And what does he say? He says, he suddenly realizes what's going on. He says, you yourselves know how it is unlawful for a man who is a Jew to associate with a foreigner or to visit him. But God has shown me that I should not call any man unholy or unclean. And I do apologize, I don't have the reference here in front of me, but in the Mishnah, it specifically says that a person who, according to the house of Shammai, they believe that a person who was converting from a Gentile had the impurity of just someone with regular impurity. But if you had someone who had impurity, the house of Hillel, they believe that someone who was a Gentile had corpse impurity. And so when they converted, they had to go through basically a ritual very similar to the para adumah, cleansing. Right? So does that make sense? Yeshua cleansed us, those who were outside of covenant, those of us who were Gentiles, estranged from the covenant, the northern kingdom and the Gentiles, all of that combined. He cleansed us so that we could come back into covenant. This purification Yeshua did is about restoring people back into covenant. It's not about temple purity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense to me.
Okay.
All right, so somebody's talking about on the question it says, nowhere there is forgiveness of these things. There is no longer any sacrifice for sin in Hebrews 10:26. The context of Hebrews chapters 10:26 or the chapters 10, the whole book of Hebrews, guys, is about Yom Kippur. That's the context. Chapter 7, chapters 8 is talking about a better priesthood in the order of Melchizedek. We're going to cover that in a minute. And then chapters 9 is about explaining Yeshua in the context of Yom HaKippurim, Yom Kippur, which continues in chapters 10. So we cannot try to extract verses from the book of Hebrews, chapters 10, if we do not understand what's going on in the whole overall letter, which was about Yom Kippur. So consider that. This is one of the biggest mistakes we all make. We take one isolated verse in one letter from Paul or anybody, in this case, the writer of the Hebrews, we don't know who it is, and then now we're trying to speculate on it, when in fact, the context, if we read it, chapters 8, 9, and 10, it's in the context of Yom Kippur, and even it talks about the para adumah in chapters 9 as we go through there. So it's something that I want you to consider. Temple service is very important that we consider and we study. Let me ask the next question. Next question. Do we apply his sacrifice and therefore we are ritually claimed to partake of the temple service? I think we already covered that. Because right now, we don't have a temple service. And people say, well, we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Well, are you ritually cleansed? Because Paul is using a metaphor. We are a type of the temple. But if you're eating pork, and if you're eating the unclean, if you're not keeping the commandments, if you're not being obedient to the Torah, if you're not keeping the Sabbath, and you're not following the Torah, then I'm sorry, then that temple is defiled, because he can only dwell in a temple that's kadosh, holy to him. And he already established the conditions for holiness of kadosh, right? So as we go from there, understand these things as we do along, okay? All right, so here we go. Next question then. This is a good one. Since the curtain was torn, that is in the holy place, and not the Holy of Holies, we do not have access into the Holy of Holies, being a king priest after the order of Melchizedek. Is this still only meant for the with the high priest? Okay, this is something that I put on your seatbelt, everybody. Okay, symbolically, go like this. Put on your seatbelt, strap it on real tight, because you guys are not going to like my answer. Okay? You guys are going to like my answer. Nowhere in the Bible, nowhere, ever says that you and I, us, individually, that we are priests in the order of Melchizedek. Nowhere. It says that Yeshua he came in the order. And the book of Hebrews tells you that he came in the similitude of Melchizedek, in the order of. It's an order of a priesthood. Two places where the Melchizedek talks about in Genesis 14 and Psalms 110. Okay? But nowhere, as a matter of fact, the only book in the New Testament that talks about Melchizedek is Hebrews. And it's in reference to Yeshua as the high priest. Yes, the veil was rent in the holy place, in the huge entrance of the Chelchal, the entry of the temple, but not the one in the Holy of Holies. There were 5 veils. Yeah, there were 5 veils in the first century temple. 1, 3, 4. I'm sorry, 4 veils in the first century temple. Okay, there was one veil at the entrance, was 76 feet high and this wide. Okay? Then you have 2 veils in the second temple period, 2 veils that divided with 1 cubit between one, okay? So the priest can walk between it. And in the second story of the temple, there was another veil. The one that was rented is the one in the holy place. That was designed, according to Josephus, like the Milky Way, like the heavens. That's the one that rented. Okay, now, with that being said, so you can say that we have access to the holy place symbolically. Because if we were in the temple, if there was a temple today, there's no way anybody who's a Gentile, or not even an Israelite, can go into the holy place, because the Bible specifically tells us that it's only for the priests in the order of Melchizedek. I'm sorry. On priests in the order of Aaron. The Levites, they have different classes of priests. Even though they're all Levites, but you have the Levites, then you have the Kohanim, and then you have the Kohen HaGadol. You have the Levites, the priests, and the high priest. They are all Levites, but not all the Levites were high priests. Now, many people in their argument to talk about the Melchizedek priesthood, which is going around rampant right now, going like crazy, and it honestly is really creating a lot of confusion. And as a temple studier, a person who studies the temple, who has a teacher on the temple who's been doing studies in the temple for 35 years, my teacher and I, we sit there and we talk, and we're going, how in the world do they come up with this stuff? Because how can you establish a theology based on an idea? So they read Ezekiel chapters 44, verse 15, okay? And if somebody is watching, if you could please post it, that verse on the chat so everybody sees it, okay? It is Ezekiel 44, verse 15. Listen to this. This is the verse they use to say that we are now the Sadokim, or the Sadakite, or Melchizedek, or whatever they call it now. It says, listen to the verse. But the priests, the Levites, the son of Sadok. Let me read that again. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Sadok, who kept my charge, who kept, in the past tense, of my charge, kept charge of my sanctuary, when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near to me and minister to me, and they shall stand before me to offer at me the fat and the blood, says the Lord Elohim. They shall enter my sanctuary, and they shall come near my table to minister to me, and they shall keep charge. And it shall be, whatever they enter the gates of the inner court, that they shall put on linen garments, no wool So now we're going to go through the whole Levitical process here of the proper protocol of the people going into the temple. Now, it doesn't say the Zadokites, believers in Yeshua, who now have encroached on the Levitical priesthood. It doesn't say that. It says the Levite, the priest, the Levite, the sons of Zadok. Who were the sons of Zadok? If you go back to the story of David, there were two high priests. There was Abiathar, no, I'm sorry. There was a Zadok who was loyal to David, and specifically when Solomon was being anointed for kingship and Adoniah was anointed for kingship. One of the priests went and followed Adoniah, the son of David, and the other one, Zadok, was faithful to David, and then he waited to anoint Solomon at the request of David. And he was loyal to David. Okay? So they're the direct descendants of Aaron. If we study the temple, we will see this. So now people take that verse and says, you see, those are the Tzaddik. They're righteous because they're righteous. Well, it just so happened to be the name of the sons of Aaron. So because Yahweh made a covenant with the children of Levites, the Levites, as a grand covenant, a covenant of peace with Pinchas. So now we come in and now we encroach on the priesthood, and now we just kick away the Levites, and now we are all priests in the order of Melchizedek. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible, guys. It doesn't say that. Now, in the book of Hebrews, it says that we will be king and priest with him. Well, we're going to have to let him determine how that's going to happen, but nowhere does it say that we're going to be priests in the order of Melchizedek. That's my... Would you guys agree with that? You guys have something to add to that, please? Go ahead. Go ahead, Tyler.
Well, the one thing that I always think of, whenever one of these things comes up, and of course Melchizedek is only mentioned 3 times in Scripture. Once when Abraham's with him, once in Psalm 110 verse 4, where it specifically talks about Yeshua being the priest of Melchizedek forever. And then in Hebrews, and we're going to make a doctrine out of all this. But the Scripture says that Jehovah never does anything without first telling it to her servants, the prophets. Servants, the prophets. If there was going to be a dispensation, and that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about a form of replacement theology. If there was going to be a dispensation where women were going to become priests, Gentiles were going to become priests, everyone who is not leading the kind of restricted, set-apart life that the Levites and the sons of Aaron were required to live is now going to be priests. Don't you think somebody would have specifically mentioned it, kind of there next to the people who were saying the law was going to be done away with? Because we don't see that either. And, you know, in Hebrew roots, we harp on, well, where do you see this? Where do you see this? Where do you see this? Well, where do you see the Melchizedek priesthood for all believers being spoken of in the Tanakh? And we do not see it. Women are, no, you know, there's no special dispensation for women. What it comes down to is that the dignity of the throne of God has never been diminished, and Yeshua's death did nothing to change that. Yeshua's death didn't somehow say, okay, ladies, you know, we realize that, and I used to have problems with this, you know, there was a court of the women where women could not go as far as the men did, and I thought, well, that's not fair, but you know what? As a woman, guess what? And I don't want to be gross here, but I could start bleeding at any time. Should I be that close to the throne and that close to the blood of the sacrifice and defile the holy things, not because there's anything wrong with me, but because I am detracting from the dignity of the throne of my king? And I believe it's in Ezekiel 43 where it says very specifically that that is the throne, the very throne of God. I think it's Ezekiel 43:7. And, you know, we got to be careful. Goodness sakes, it is a form of replacement theology. God is never going to do anything ever, without telling his servants, the prophets, especially not something big like changing the priesthood. The priest had to live by very exclusive rules that none of us would be. I wouldn't be willing to be told that I can only marry from a certain tribe, I'm just not that dedicated. I mean, but that's the kind of thing that the priests were expected. And so that's just what I wanted to add on that.
Okay, so there was a question here on the chat. It was, doesn't Yeshua fulfill all of the sacrifices, the trespass, the burnt offering, the peace, and the fellowship offering? With this, this is a question of, oftentimes, what does the English word fulfill mean, and where exactly are we getting this theology from? What I want to bring up is first off, to kind of start the question here is, I want to bring up a map of the Roman world, the Roman Empire, because this is something that for me has really helped to broaden my understanding here. Okay, so as you can see here on the screen, we've got the map of the Roman Empire, and you can see it's quite a large empire. And I'm going to zoom in down here a little bit closer, and we can see we've got Judea, right, and Galilee was actually a completely separate province here. And this map is from 117 AD. But during the time of Yeshua, Babylon was actually not part of the Roman Empire. It was part of the Parthian Empire. In fact, Babylon only fell for like a period of 3 weeks to the Roman Empire. If you wanted to travel from Babylon to Judea, that would have taken 3 to 4 months at least, traveling in a party of 5,000 people. If you wanted to travel from Antioch, up there in Syria, right, and we know Antioch a lot from the New Testament, that would have taken a period of about 3 weeks. There was also a large Jewish settlement down in Alexandria. That also would have taken a period of at least a month. And then, of course, Rome, if you go all the way over to Rome, we're talking, by sea, we're talking a period of probably 3 months. I haven't been able to find solid figures on that, but you can see this was a very large empire, and by the way, most Jews did not live in the land. There was only between 1 and 2 million Jews who lived in the land of Judea. 5 million of them lived in places like Babylon, Alexandria, and Rome. Okay, so with that context in mind, most people could not sacrifice. Most people only had the chance to sacrifice maybe once in their lifetime, when they somehow finally got a chance to get away from their slave master, or actually saved up enough money to take an 8-month journey to Jerusalem for the feast. Most of them participated in the sacrificial service through their payment of the half-shekel temple tax. This temple tax went to the temple, right? It went to the Sadducees, and they would use that to purchase the daily offerings and everything like that. So for the average citizen who's receiving the message of Yeshua, they aren't really worried about sacrifices in the manner that we have been, that I have been raised to believe that that they all basically, here's what I was led to believe when I was raised, is that every time someone sinned, God had to kill something, and so instead of God killing the person, he killed the animal. Well, there's a problem. In the first century, no one believed that, because most Jews could not actually perform that, right? They believed the same as we do, that forgiveness comes through repentance and teshuvah, right, and prayer. However, we've got to think, there's the national level, right, and there's the individual level. So on an individual level, you got the forgiveness. How are sins forgiven on the national level? The day of Yom Kippur, which is what the book of Hebrews, like Rick just talking about, the book of Hebrews is showing us how Yeshua is the fulfillment of Yom Kippur for the national forgiveness of sins. That's where their concern would have been in that context, right? So on an individual level, Yeshua, in a manner, his death was likened to some of these sacrifices, right? In the sense of the whole burnt offering. The whole burnt offering was a petition to God, right? And so his death somewhat to petitions God's presence to return to earth in the form of resurrecting Yeshua. The trespass offering, or the guilt offering, that was offered for the cleansing or the purification of a leper, which I talked about in the previous in some previous sessions. I also have a whole separate teaching called the Leper Messiah, where that is a picture of moving us from death to life. The chatat, the sin offering, right? That is a purification of the temple. And so, that all has that one specifically. You never see that one offered anywhere outside of the context of the temple.
Okay.
And then the peace offering is how Yeshua fulfilled as the Passover, the context of covenant, because peace offerings were often made in covenant. So Yeshua did fulfill these, but they were in a greater aspect of, like, Yom Kippur, of the red heifer. The red heifer was a sin offering, by the way. It was a chatat, right? So he did fulfill those, but in a much greater aspect.
Yeah. What we have here is Daniel cannot be on tonight, but he's sending me messages about this. Oh, he's sending me. Daniel cannot be on tonight, but he's sending me a message about me. He says the contrast of the two orders. You have the heavenly cosmic order, which is the Melchizedek order, which, by the way, you and I, we do not have any kind of jurisdiction in the heavenly realm. Why? Because we are flesh and blood. So this is the contrast. You have the earthly tabernacle, which is a copy of the heavenly tabernacle. So obviously you have two types of order of priesthood. The Levitical order, then you have the Melchizedek order. The Melchizedek order is the heavenly cosmic temple. Okay, it's an order of a priesthood, the similitude of. Then you have the earthly order, which is the Levites have been put there in place. Like I just put up there in Hebrew, in Leviticus, I just posted something out there in the chat, which it says, which is Numbers chapters 3, verse 11. It says this: Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Here I hereby accept the Levites from among the children of Israel, among the Israel, a substitute. Okay? And then it says, For all the firstborn, open of the womb, among the Israelites, the Levites shall be mine. That's the language of adoption. That means that the Lord had adopted them. He basically became their father. So that means that no one can do away with them. So you have the cosmic temple and the cosmic order, and then you have the earthly temple and the earthly order of the priesthood. The book of Hebrews specifically tells us in Hebrews chapters 8, verse 4, For if he were on earth, he would not be a priest, since they are priests who offer the gifts according to the law. So that's very interesting. So if Yeshua, if he was on earth, he would be a priest in the order of Melchizedek, then what makes you and I think that now we can be priests in the order of Melchizedek on the earth, when even Yeshua, the high priest in the order of Melchizedek, cannot be priest on the earth? Think about that. If Yeshua cannot be the priest on the earth, why? Because he is not a Levite. Well, Rico, Miriam, his cousin was Elizabeth, and she was a Levite. Yeah, but the priesthood does not come from the woman. The priesthood comes from the father. And the last time I checked, Yeshua comes from the line of Judah based on the adoption from Joseph. So what we have here is, if Yeshua could not be a priest on the earth because they're already priests offering sacrifices, then where in the world do we get the idea that now you and I can be high priests or priests in the order of Melchizedek? And by the way, I want to say something. You go back to some of my old things, like 8 years ago, I was making that mistake. Okay, I needed to repent, I needed to change, and I needed to correct myself. And I don't have a problem doing that. I'm not here to be a know-it-all. I'm here trying to learn. Okay, so I was wrong all those years back. I've been studying the temple. I've been continuing to look, and like Tyler said, This is another form of replacement theology, replacing the priesthood of the Lord for a priesthood who do not have the legal jurisdiction to claim any authority whatsoever. It's called encroachment. Very dangerous thing to do. Matthew, you have something to add, buddy?
No, I'm just following up. Daniel's over here posting, and he's absolutely correct in his comments. You know, how do we think we can officiate the cosmic temple and the cosmic order that Yah has set up over all of creation? I don't have the authority to do it. I don't think I'm responsible enough to do it, and I certainly don't think that that I have the experience to do it. All I can do is serve my King, and I think that's exactly what Scripture lays out. But I mean, you're right. I used to teach this stuff too. This is what I was actually taught in church. You know, Levites are done away with, and we're the new Melchizedek priesthood, and our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. You know, that's totally been all trash now. Guys, when we actually start sitting down and reading stuff, it's a very humbling experience when you're reading stuff and you come to the place where, wow, I'm not sure anymore about what I believed before, because there's a lot of evidence out there that I was wrong, or even that, man, I never even thought of it that way. There are lots of resources out there, lots of books that completely crushed everything, my entire foundation of my own theology about what I thought God's kingdom looked like. And guys, prepare, because if you're truly in the kingdom, then God is going to humble you. He's going to make you the perfect servant in the kingdom, and that requires you to be crushed at some way, shape, or point in time. And, you know, we get in our high horses, and, yeah, we understand the Melchizedek priesthood because we're a priest, and we can go into the temple and do all this other stuff. When we actually look at that in Scripture, especially with the culture that surrounded it, yeah, not so much at all. So I appreciate that question coming up, because you know, that's something I used to teach, and I was absolutely wrong when I taught it, because I didn't take the measures to actually study it out. I just saw something, I went with it because I was sensational about it, and I was emotional about it, and I taught on it. And I was wrong for doing that in the past. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Okay, next question. This is going to be an interesting one. Are all the people in the church the lost tribes of Israel? Are you ready? Here we go. Grab your seatbelt again, put them on, and let's go for this. It's the next question. Are all the Christians in the church the last sheep of Israel? The answer is no. The answer is no. I believe that amongst the Christian churches, you will find the remnant of Israel, but no, you do not. I do not believe, again, this is one of the things that I needed to learn a long time ago. I believe that. I believe that all of the church was Israel. That was back 1998, for crying out loud. I mean, I like to think that I read a little more since 1998. So it's like I finally understood that within the church, there's the lost tribes of Israel. How do I know? Ask me. Ryan, ask me. How do you know?
How do you know, Rico?
Because I'm one of them. I'm a descendant of the Levites living among the nations, and I found out that I was from the base because I'm the Bnei Anusim. Bnei Anusim are the first ones from Spain that came to Latin America. Okay? So we know that. But that's not the case for every single person. You know, so the question is, if you are, stop shaking. Sorry. If you are in the church system and you have this desire to know about the God of Israel, what does the Bible say in regards to Gentiles? That you're now part of the Commonwealth of Israel. But in Acts 15, by the way, the problem of the first century is exactly what's happening today. In Acts 15, when James stands up and he bears witness that now the Gentiles do have a part in the kingdom after the testimony of Peter in regards to Cornelius, what do they say? Read verse 15 and 16 with me of chapters 15 of the book of Acts. It says, and with this the words of the prophets agree, as it is written, after this I will return and I will rebuild the tabernacle of David, which have fallen. Those are the 12 tribes. Restore the kingdom, right? And I will rebuild its ruins. I will set it up. So that listen to this. So that the rest of mankind may seek the Lord, even all the Gentiles who are called by my name, says the Lord who does all these things. So obviously, this is not just Israel who's among the Gentiles. Now we have the Gentiles who are among the nations who want to do what? Be part of the covenant. So Paul is dealing with, how do I fight for their rights? Paul as a immigration lawyer. Paul as an immigration lawyer is trying to establish the legal right of this community. And in Ephesians chapter 1, chapters 2, he does a great job explaining how they become part of the kingdom for the commonwealth of Israel. The word there is politie, which means citizenship. Okay, so you have a native-born American. We're talking about the modern-day Americans, because the native-born Americans are the, American Native Americans. Well, we're not talking about them. They're the real Americans, by the way. They're native-born. They're, American natives. But now we have people who came from the outside of the United States, right? And they come in. Let's say that I am a U.S. citizen, but I am not a native-born. I was born in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. I'm a great example of the whole thing. I was born in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, protected under the Constitution of the United States. Thus, I received citizenship, and I have the same right as any native-born American in the mainland here, but I was not born in the United States. But still, I have the same rights. So legally now, what we have is the immigration lawyer, Paul, trying to convey the message of the legal right for the Gentiles based on what? On the mandate that the Lord gave Abraham. The Lord gave a mandate to Abraham, says, for I know that Abraham would teach his children to keep the way of the Lord and to do righteousness and justice, so that what was promised to Abraham will come to him. So in other words, the duty of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, and the remnant of Israel that is coming out of the church, is to provoke the nations to jealousy by submitting to the Torah, following the authority of the covenant, and then the nations will see Israel being blessed. So then the nations say, we want to serve your God. Like Ruth, I want your God to be my God, your people my people, will you die, will die. So, no, the Goy, not all the Christians are the sheep of Israel. There's a remnant of the children of Israel amongst the Christians, just like there's a remnant of the children of Israel amongst the Muslims, just like the remnant of the children of Israel amongst the Hindus. Why? Because they were scattered all over the nations. So they're amongst the nations, and they will come out as Gentiles because they're living like Gentiles. So you don't know who they are. So they could be Israel or not. But it's not about genealogy, because we have a way to come near the covenant by the blood of Messiah as the indexing of the covenantal relationship, so that we will have full rights in the kingdom. So when everybody's arguing about one house, two houses, or whatever, it just makes no sense what we argue about it. Why? Because we want identity? It's not good enough to be a U.S. citizen? You want to argue about whether or not you're black, you're white, or you're Indian, or you're Muslim, or you're this, or you're that? No, you see, in America for so long, it didn't matter where you came from. You were all U.S. citizens, and that's rapidly changing. Now even citizens are fighting with each other because of the strife of race that has been created by the leadership in this country, which would lead to a civil war eventually. But what's interesting is the war that we see right now in the community and society amongst races, that is exactly the same problem we see in Christianity and Jewish and now Hebrew and Messianic Judaism. The same problem is affecting from the spiritual to the physical. So, do all the Christians are the lost sheep of Israel? No. But from among the Christians' churches, you will find a remnant amongst them, just like there is a remnant of Jews who are Muslims and they don't even know the Jews, and they're Israelites. Go to the Hebron. My guide was telling me that in Hebron there are people who have like the little holes in the door, and you were there with me, so you know Hilo said that, and they follow traditions that are not Muslim traditions, that are Jewish traditions, and they ask them, say, well, our families did that. So I hope I did a good job answering that. You want to add more to that? I'm sure you
Yeah.
do. Come on. Ryan is here in my house with me, by the way. Ryan is here in my house with me, by the way. So.
So there's two books that I would recommend. Let me pull myself up here on screen. I do apologize for the whole screen thing. I have to. Normally it automatically shifts to whoever's talking, but since I'm here with Rico and we're sharing the same mic, it's not doing the switching automatically. So here's the first book. This one is called Paul Within Judaism, and it's by Mark Nanos. Right? So there's that book, and there's also this book I'd recommend. It's called Paul Was Not a Christian, and it's by Pamela Eisenbaum. And both of these books, and there's a lot of other books that, and I'm going to be doing some studies on this in the future, but they've made it very clear that Paul was arguing not against keeping the Torah. Paul was arguing against trusting in your earthly lineage as a means of salvation. That term, works of the Torah, that we've all been told means to do the Torah, we need to rethink that. Let me ask you this. If I said I was part of the right-wing party, do you think that that means that I'm part of a party that's on the right wing of like an airplane or a bird? No, of course not. We know that we can't take the terms, the word right and wing, and figure out which each mean individually and then combine them together to get the meaning. Because if we try to do that, we're going to completely miss the idea that in the United States the right-wing party is the conservatives, and in Europe the right-wing party is the liberal progressives. Right? So it even depends on where you're at. The same thing happens when Paul uses the term works of the law, right? Ergon nomos in the Greek. When he's talking about works of the law, you cannot take those terms and separate that into works and Torah. That's not what he's talking about. That was the fault of Mark, the anti-Semite guy in the 1600s who said that Jews should be, their synagogues should be burned. That's where we got that idea from. When Paul is referring to works of the law, if you study it out, these books have it, and there's a lot of other great resources. Like I said, I've been doing some studies here in the near future on wisdom in Torah and on rooted in Torah, and I'm going to show you guys those terms are referring to Jewish identity, and Jewish identity was controlled by the rabbis. Remember when Yeshua said, you guys are shutting up the kingdom of heaven through your traditions? They were saying that people like Cornelius, even though he did tzedakah, even though he did righteousness and gave alms, even though he prayed 3 times a day to the God of Israel, they were saying that because he would not submit to their conversion process, that he was not Jewish, and therefore he was not justified. That's what Paul is arguing, is that you're not justified by being Jewish, by what men define as Jewishness. You're justified by your faith in God. And when you read that, Paul is making an argument that everyone, as Rico was just saying there, not just the northern kingdom, but everyone, including those people who have a Jewish identity, must be justified by their faithfulness in God. We don't get a free skate because we've discovered through DNA testing that we are Jewish or this tribe or that tribe or whatever. Everyone, no matter who they are, is justified by their faithfulness to God, regardless of who their daddy was or who their grandfather was.
All right. Anybody have another question?
And we did have a question on the temple. Let's see. It says, if we are not the temples of the Ruach, doesn't Paul? Oops, my thing skipped down here. Doesn't Paul say that we're the temple? Our bodies are the temple. So that's the question. And what I had responded there before we could get into this is, let's make sure that we actually read the passage in context.
Where is it?
It is in 1 Corinthians 6. It's verse 19, and it.
1 Corinthians 6. Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to go after you.
So I'll read it, and then I'll let Rico get into this, because here's the thing. The system of Christianity has sadly trained us in this single text, proof text culture, right? And the reality is that Paul was writing a letter, and that everything he says is building upon each other and is interrelated. So realistically, if we really wanted to study out this in fullness, we actually would need to read the entire 1 Corinthians letter. But since we don't have the time to do this here, I'm just going to read the verses preceding this. Yeah, I did. It just takes a minute to update. All things are lawful to me, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be mastered by any. Food is for the stomach, and the stomach is for food, but God will do away with both of them. Yet the body is not for immortality, but for the master. Kurios. That, by the way, that word kurios, there, that when you see Lord in your Bible, guess who was called Lord? Who everyone was required in Corinth. Corinth was an imperial city, by the way. Every single person, unless they were Jewish, was required to declare Caesar as their Lord, as their kurios. And yet Paul here is saying, no, it's not Caesar who is kurios, who is Lord, it's Yeshua. So he says, but for the Lord, for Yeshua, for the kurios, and the kurios is for the body. Now God has not only raised Yeshua, the Lord, but will also raise us up with his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Messiah? Shall I then take away the members of Messiah and make them members of a prostitute? May it never be. Or do you not know that the one who joins himself to a prostitute is one body with her? For as he says, the two shall become one flesh. But when one joins himself to the master, is one spirit with him. Flee immorality. Every sin that a man commits is outside the body, but the immoral man sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is within you, whom you have got from God and not your own? Right? So the context there is what? Immorality, sexual sin with a prostitute.
But they don't know. Can they hear me too?
Yeah, they can hear
you.
So
they don't know because they're not studying imperial cult. So when you're done there, I want to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so what we have there is what is called imperial cult. An imperial cult that they have. Okay, this is really fascinating because hand me all those books again, please. All those books again. Right here. Right here. I think there's one more somewhere in there.
There's this one.
There you go, and I left the other one over there. Okay, so you have all this, and I'm reading one more that I'm reading over there about imperial cult. Okay? I'm going to try to take pictures, and later on I'm going to put them on the website or on Facebook. Okay? All these about imperial cult. This is probably the authority on that. Very good one. Okay? And then we have this one, but I will start with this one. Backgrounds of early backgrounds of early Christianity. All right. Then we have imperial cults and the Apocalypse of John. It's a fascinating book. Okay. You cannot understand the book of Revelations if you don't know it's imperial cult. It's just not going to make any sense. And then you have Paul and the Empire. Okay. Very good book too. Okay. So this is the way it happened. In imperial cult, something fascinating occurred all the time, which was that if you get invited to a house, let's say that I'm a very rich man and I become your patron, and in the first century, patronage was huge. I mean, this was the whole way of life. You're looking for somebody who was your patron so that he can give you favors and things like that. By the way, this is the reason, Ryan, why Paul never collected the money when he was there. Yep. Because then that would have made Paul bound to give another man the patronage instead of the father. Okay, so this is why he never asked for money there. He couldn't have. Okay. Anyway, so if I'm a rich man and I invite you guys to a dinner, like in the evidence that we have in imperial cult is that I was bound to make an imperial dinner. Like I invite you to dinner. It's a feast. We have libations. We have prayers and divination for the gods that we worship in imperial cults. And then I am supposed to provide for you entertainment. That means foreign women or prostitutes. How would you know a prostitute or a loose woman, what is called the new woman in Roman imperial cults? They will not wear veils. That was the way you would know a woman who was improper. It's called the new woman. She can be rich, but she can be promiscuous, and she can, do all kinds of crazy stuff. By the way, according to law, according to Roman law, which I have the book somewhere on there, according to Roman law, a man can have sex. Listen to this. A man can have sex with a woman as long as she is not a Roman citizen. She can be a slave, or she can be a free woman, stranger. She can be a foreigner, but she cannot be a Roman citizen. That will make him an adulteress. An adulterer, I'm sorry. So Paul is saying, no, all of it is adultery. I'm making the contrast. You can go to a dinner, eat of the table of the Lord, and eat of the table of demons, and then sleep around in fornication. By the way, fornication in the first century was tied in together with temple prostitution. And the moment you dedicate the food to the God that you worship, and you have sex in that party, everything had to do with imperial worship. So Paul is making a contrast for a problem. He is saying, guys, remember that we are holy people. Israel's a people, is holy. So you're holy people. You're a temple of the Lord. You're supposed to represent it's a metaphor. It's trying to make a contrast between...
It's a midrash.
It's a midrash. Exactly. It's a midrash. Paul trying to bring a context of the problem in Corinth. And he is saying, no. If you go sleep around, if she's a foreigner or a prostitute, no, that's still adultery. According to the Torah standards, that's still adultery. Fornication, no. You're not supposed to practice temple prostitution like they did in the ancient Near East. That's why we don't have women officiating in the temple. Because in the ancient world, they have temple prostitutes. So the women in Israel are not allowed to officiate in the temple so that the people will never say that the women in Israel are prostitutes. So in reality, Paul is teaching them Torah.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's teaching them Torah in the context of what is going on in the Corinth. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to make this statement. You may not like it because you may be not exposed to some of the information that we're reading. It doesn't mean that we know more than you. It's just that we're researching it for you. I've come to the conclusion that Paul in no way in 1st and 2nd Corinthians or 1st and 2nd Timothy and Ephesians, Paul is not talking at all against anything that has to do with Judaism of the 1st century, in my opinion. He is more, at least like 80% of the letter is all about the problem, 80%, the problem in Corinth, the problem in Ephesus, and the problem in Asia Minor in regards to imperial cult. And you even mentioned to me today that a lot of the letters of Paul is basically heavily written against imperial worship and imperial sovereignty. Go ahead, talk about that.
I mean,
change the screen so we can see it.
The big thing Paul ever had against Judaism is reliance on circumcision and
salvation
and their Jewish identity as a means of salvation, as justification. That's where Paul took issue with, with the so-called the Jews, right? Which was realistically is actually a small group of the Jews. Most Jews weren't even going around preaching circumcision. We've got to realize, in the 1st century, there was no such thing as Judaism. There was the house of Hillel, there was the house of Shammai, there was the Sadducees, there was the Essenes, there was the Hellenists. There was all sorts of different groups with all sorts of different beliefs. And then, like, for example, if you go to Philippians 3, right? In Philippians 3, it's really weird because all of a sudden, Paul launches into this weird language here. He says, listen to this, beware of the dogs, beware of the evil workers, beware of the false circumcision or the mutilation, for we are the true circumcision, who worship the Spirit of God and the glory in Messiah Yeshua and put no confidence in the flesh. And then he goes on to say, I should be able to boast more in the flesh. What does that mean by in the flesh? Very clearly, he's talking about his Jewish pedigree, his Jewishness. He's saying he puts no confidence in that. Now, what's interesting is, why is he saying beware of the dogs? When are Jews ever called dogs and evil workers and false circumcision? Can I propose to you that because we only have evidence that those were things that they called the Gentiles, that he's actually dealing with a group of people who were Gentiles who converted under the rabbinic method of circumcision for salvation, who were then going around trying to tell everyone else that they had to do likewise.
That's why the whole Galatians is all about.
It's a bunch of converts who are going around and trying to make everyone follow this crazy conversion thing. Okay, so imperial cult. The thing is that we don't follow Paul's letters because we don't live in that culture. Did you know that every single city that he wrote a letter to was what was like kind of the main focal point of imperial cult in that region? All right, Galatia, Corinth, where else? Thessalonica,
Ephesus.
right? Ephesus. All of those were the controlling area in their region, and they had imperial temples built in the center of the town, in the most prestigious part in the town, and in the highest part of the town. People believed Caesar was the Son of God. In fact, I've got some quotes that I'm going to be putting in some PowerPoints soon, where they actually said that Caesar was more powerful than the Olympian gods.
Yeah.
They believed him more powerful than Zeus.
There were 176 imperial priests. There were 176 imperial cults. There were over 176 imperial altars, and there were over 170 imperial temples in Asia Minor alone.
In Asia Minor alone, this is massive. So Caesar was known as the Son of God. Caesar was known as Kurios, or Master or Lord, what you see Yeshua being called constantly. Caesar was known as the Savior of the world. They didn't need salvation because Augustus Caesar had already brought salvation to the world according to their rhetoric of the time. Caesar brought peace to the world, Pax Romana, the peace of earth. And Caesar's birthday was every year celebrated as the good news, i.e. the gospel. So you see, Paul takes words that we're familiar with in our Hebrew Bible, but why did he choose those certain words to apply them to Yeshua? Because those exact same words in the Greek were being applied to Caesar in that day and time. We're really starting to see, I mean, do you agree with me, Enrico, that we're really starting to, Paul is casting this, who is your master, who is your mediator, who is your patron, Yeshua or Caesar, and Yeshua being the mediator, of course, to God the Father.
Well, that's which leads to the next question, which about what role does Yeshua play as a mediator or the broker of the patron and the client. So let me set this up. You have the client, Israel, you have the patron, which is God, Yahweh, and then you have Yeshua, who's also a patron, but he is leading Israel to his greater patron. That's why he says, my Father is greater than I. Okay, all that language is Zuzur and vassal language, and also client and patron. In the first century, this is the one thing that we're learning, that without understanding imperial cult, you will never truly understand patronage and client relationship in the first century. All the letters of Paul are dealing with who is the greater patron, Caesar or the Lord. Caesar or Yeshua, who leads you to the Lord. That's why when you were reading in Romans chapter 10, that if you confess with your mouth that Yeshua is master, the word there is important, master, because they believe that Caesar was even greater than the Jupiter, you said?
He was greater than the Olympian gods.
Than the Olympian gods. So there was a struggle for a competition for honor, just like it happened in Egypt, right? Competition for honor. So Now, Paul is trying to convey the message of who is greater. Is Yeshua greater than Caesar? Because it's Yeshua who gives us access to the great patriarch. By the way, I'm a patriarch in the case of the studies that we're doing here with Daniel, with Tyler, with Matthew, with Ryan. They are independent ministries, but we all got together and we said, well, let me help you guys get you more out there and study together. Let's exchange. Let's talk together. We don't really look at each other like I'm greater than them, because we are all servants of the same patron. You follow? But because we follow the same patron, which is the Lord, that Yeshua, our master, leads us to, I am bound by the Torah to help my brothers in equality, but because of ministry, some of us have a little bit more exposure than others. So the association that we have together, right, that we're together, so now they say, well, he studies with Rico, or he studies with Daniel, or he studies with Matthew, or he studies with Tyler. So we helped you guys bring you to a greater audience through a patronage-client relationship. Would that make sense?
Absolutely.
Now, eventually, you will become a broker. You will tell me, hey, Rico, I have someone who would like to study with us that I think has a lot of potential to be a speaker in the Hebrew Roots movement, or whatever you want to call it. And I say, yeah, let's welcome them in. And then you gave them access as if you will have a meeting with the President of the United States. That person who sets up the meeting for you becomes your broker.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's going on in imperial cult in the first century of Paul. Listen, I'm going to make this statement again. Are you ready? Put on the seatbelt again. Okay. Hey, Lucy, you got some explaining to do. We got a lot of apologies to get to Paul sometimes. I'm recognizing that none of us really understand what Paul is really saying. And it's concerning. It's concerning that we don't really know what Paul is really conveying. Corinthians, and I want you to agree or disagree with me there, Ryan and Daniel and Tyler, that Paul is not talking to the Jews in that sense. I don't think his main audience was the Jewish people in this case. He went to the Jewish people, they rejected him, he walked away, and then he went to the Gentiles. He went to the Jew first, and then he went to the Gentile. He followed the biblical protocol, the covenant people, and then the nations.
And in every city, he always followed that pattern too. He always went to the synagogue first.
Right. So what we see here is that Paul is dealing with the contrast of imperial cult, right, and imperial worship, and what is a submissive woman in imperial worship, and what is a loose woman in Roman law. Let me ask you all a question that are watching today. How many of you have studied Roman criminal law, Roman law? How many of you are aware of imperial cult and worship and how it was done? Shaking. Okay.
I'm just typing.
Oh, okay. So what happens is, if we do not study those things, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Ephesians, even Colossians, all those letters are dealing with a problem that deals directly with imperial worship. For example, I've been talking about it on Facebook. Hopefully, we have it. Well, man, time goes by. Before I go on, Matthew, you want something to say? You have something to add, Tyler? You guys doing okay?
You guys are owning this subject pretty good. This question.
You have something to add to that, buddy? Okay, so women. Let's talk about that. The example that Paul gives us about praying in public. The whole issue is here, praying in public.
Yeah.
Because the Jews, they had an exemption from the government for a little while there, that they were allowed. They were the only religion that was allowed to have their own place of worship. They could only do it on the synagogues, though. So the issue here is not whether or not you put a talit on to pray. I wear a talit when I pray. That's not even the issue, because you're not doing it in public, in an imperial city. Okay? So when you look at all movies, and I was watching the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, ancient Roman, and they showed a guy that when they did a sacrifice to Jupiter, the first thing the guy did, he covers his head. So what happens is, when the men are praying in imperial cities, covering your head in public, it brings dishonor to him. Why? Because that's the way they used to worship the imperial gods in public. They used to cover their heads. Paul is saying, don't act like them in an imperial city. But I guarantee you, if you will go to the synagogue at the time when they're worshiping the God of Israel, not the imperial city, they will cover their head because that was a custom in the ancient world. But not in public. The issue here is praying in public. Now, you go to women, whether they should cover or not. Now, we don't live in a culture right now in the West that women cover their hair everywhere they go, but in the Middle East, you see it, that women cover their head. If they don't cover their hairs in the Middle East, or cover their face in some extreme, they put a plastic bag over them, the black one, you know. But what happens in Rome, they have what is called the new Roman woman. They were women with money or prestige, or they're just very loose women, and they will not cover themselves. They will without veil, and they will consider prostitutes. So let's go read in Corinthians real quick, chapters 11. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I mean, this is turning out better than I expected.
Yeah.
I don't like questions and answers, guys. I really don't, because people come in with all kinds of crazy questions trying to create problems, and I want to thank every single one of you there that stay with the topic. I see people asking questions that have nothing to do with what. Listen, we're answering questions that I know you guys don't know, and you're asking questions that have nothing to do with the topic. Really? Makes no sense. Try to get the ones that we're trying to answer before you ask questions that are not part of the agenda right now. Okay? I know we all have questions, but in order, guys, in order. We can answer them all in one day. We're not talking about communion right now. All right. But it's a good question, and we can get to that later on. But
yeah.
right now, we're trying to explain this as important. When you read Romans 11, okay, Paul says, imitate me just as I imitate Messiah. Now, I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things to keep the traditions that I delivered to you. But I want you to know that the head of every man is Messiah, the head of a woman is the man, and the head of Messiah is the Lord. This perfect order. Okay? Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonor his head. Every man, the issue here, men praying in Corinth, not in America, not Israel at that time, is praying in Corinth. So far, so good, right? In letter to the Corinthians. Says, but every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered, dishonor her head, for that is one as the same as if she have her head was shaved. Okay, what does that mean? The new woman in Rome, they will not cover their head. They were like the feminists that you see right now. They want to do whatever they want to do. Okay, we have the same structure. But in Roman law, when a woman was accused of adultery and she was guilty of adultery, you know what was one of the penalties for her? Shaving her head. So Paul is basically saying, guys, to pray in public, you do not cover your head because of imperial worship. Women, if you uncover your head, right, it's as if you're shaved. Because the way in Rome, the way a woman dressed, it let everybody know if she was modest or if she was a new woman. Even the veils were different. So in Rome, if you wear clothes that will cover your head and cover as much as you could, that let everybody know she's married and she is modest. But if you did not cover your head and you wear certain clothes that were provocative, then they will consider them as prostitutes. And Paul is saying, if you do not cover your head, you're not showing that you are a modest married woman. Might as well shave your head off, because they're going to look at you as a prostitute. They're going to see you as an adulteress. By the way, did you know that one of the signs of a woman not being happy with the man was that if she will remove her veil for 3 straight days, then she's sending a message to her husband she no longer wants to be married? So obviously, this topic was a huge issue. You know what really makes me laugh now? Is that I see many people in the Hebrew Roots movement that have young little girls covering their head and they're not married. And they cover their head and they're not married. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to cover your head, if you want to go to that level of observance, I have no problems with that. But you cannot expect a 17, a 15, a 13, a 12-year-old, or a 17, a 19, or 20-year-old who's not married to cover her hair. Because you're saying she's married. Understanding culture is important. In Israel, you see it all the time. Now, the moment they get married in the Orthodox family and the Orthodox faith, then they cover their head, or in some extreme Orthodox, they shave off their head and they put a wig on. Okay? I hope that makes sense, guys. I hope that makes sense.
And this is where it's important. You know, Rico and I were talking about this earlier today. We've got to distinguish between what's culture and what's a commandment. Right? There's certain things that are culture, and especially especially with Paul's writings, we see things that are culture due to the environment that they were living in. Paul didn't write to all the other congregations and tell them the same thing as Corinth because they were living in a different system where they had different customs and such there. And so it's important for us to get that context. Otherwise, this is there was a question that I had when I was in Costa Rica. A young woman asked me the question, Paul says that it's better for us not to get married, and that basically if you get married it's because you're weak and you can't control your own lusts and passions, right? And so her question is, should I look to get married and have kids, because that's what I see the rest of the Bible talking about. And this is a perfect example of why we have to look at the culture and the history even. Okay, what was going on in the culture at that time? In first century Judaism, it was believed that a couple who got married, if they got married, they believed it was a commandment for them to have kids. And if they did not have kids together within 10 years, the rabbis would go and they would force this couple to divorce and marry two other people in hopes that at least one of them would start having children. So this is the background mindset going on in the people of Corinth, right?
Judaism, to this day, they do that too.
And Judaism to this day does this. So they believe that they're going to be breaking God's law if they don't get married and have kids. Well, now you've got this situation in Corinth. Did you know at that time when Paul wrote that letter, there was a severe famine in Corinth? People are already poor, right? Now you're being faced with severe famine. People don't even know if they can feed themselves, let alone a child. So they're struggling with, well, should I fulfill this commandment to multiply, or should I make sure that I have enough to feed myself, right? And so Paul writes to them this letter showing them that, look, it's okay, especially, and you notice he says, given our circumstance, or something to that effect, right? And I forgot to change the camera here. And given our circumstance, this is what's going on. It's okay for you not to get married and to not have kids because we're in a famine, people. Right? He didn't intend for the rest of the movement, the Yeshua movement, to go on and never get married, or to look up to people who never got married, i.e., those priests who instead of getting married they go to the well, you know the story. So I hope that makes sense, for why it's so important for us to look at what's a commandment and what's a cultural requirement given that certain time. It's the same thing, like Rico was saying, shaving the heads. Rico, why do women shave their heads in Judaism today?
It's a different context altogether.
It basically... Right, what happened was they were being raped in Europe. The women were being raped in Europe, and so they started shaving their heads so they could look like men. Well, are Jewish women in fear of being raped today?
No.
No.
It became a ruling when it was something that was done for a particular problem.
Exactly. It became a ruling for a particular problem. This is what we need to pick out in Scripture. See particular problems, i.e. what Paul was dealing with, and seeing a ruling.
Okay. So, Tyler, you got this question. All right. Does being righteous include giving? Is it important to give, and why is it important?
Well, I mean, let's talk about what righteous means. Because I don't know exactly what the questioner was asking. Because Cornelius was righteous because he gave alms. It says that in Acts 10. You know, we've got Zedek, means to be in the right. So let's talk about it in terms of righteousness, being in the right. We are commanded in the Torah, throughout the prophets and the New Testament, to absolutely give. We have to take care of the least of these. It's the radical social equity we are called to. We have to take care of the poor, the widows, the orphaned, the oppressed, and the foreigners. We have to take care of them. We have to give. If you do not give, then no, you absolutely can't be righteous. You can't be in the right with God. If we have, we are required to take care of the least of these. Now, so that's the easy part that everyone sees all through the scriptures. It's the weightier matters of Torah, justice and righteousness. Let's talk about the flip side of this, and let's talk about the second most abused verse in the Bible, you know, right after judge not, lest you be judged, you know. Matthew 10, 7 through 13. This is Yeshua talking to his disciples. And as you go preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely you have received. Freely you have received, freely give. Provide neither gold nor silver nor brass in your purses, nor scrip for your journey, neither two coats nor shoes, your staves, for the workman is worthy of his meat. And we got to realize that, because a lot of people, they look at what we do, okay, and of course our books are free, and our internet sites are free, and the cameras that we use are free, and our education is free, and the video hosting is absolutely free. We have absolutely no cost. Let me tell you something, that it's all taken care of magically, you know, and we have no out-of-pocket expenses whatsoever. All these books, you know, that I buy and read, they were donated. They really were. And the people who wrote those books, they get their needs taken care of too. They did all their studies, and no one gives them anything because, you know, they got it for free, and so they give it for free. No, this all costs an awful lot of money, and I'm very fortunate. I'm the only person on the panel who has a husband, right? Yeah. Okay, so I have this husband who's working, and he supports me, which is a good thing because I don't even make enough money off of my books to support my book habit, but he's a great guy. Anyway, so let's look at giving to your teachers, and let's look at those verses in context. Now, that was a patron-client grace relationship society, and it was unthinkable. It was unthinkable. It was dishonorable in that society if you had the means and someone was teaching you not to provide for them. If you were a respectable person in the city and a prophet came through, or a teacher came through, traveling rabbi came through, if they had needs and you were taking from them and you weren't giving back, it just wouldn't happen. And so Yeshua was talking in the context of that kind of culture. Don't worry about taking anything with you. Don't worry about taking money or a staff or extra clothing, because this is a grace relationship. You're going to give, and they're going to give back to you, and you're going to give more, because that is how things worked. It was a reciprocal relationship, and no one would just have this expectation if they had the means of taking without giving back. So, can we be righteous? Let's talk about the Facebook community, and I'm going to get really mean, and I'm going to hit some people hard, because I never do that, right? Okay, I see people on Facebook talk about all the money they spend on organic food. I see people talking about all the money they spend on essential oils, because if you don't spend the money on your health, you're going to be spending it at the doctor's office. Oh, but we don't really care if there's food on the table of our teachers, much less study materials, much less rent money. And yeah, I don't have these needs like my teachers do, because I've got a husband who provides for me, but I should shudder to think if he was ever unemployed and having to be at the mercy of the people who are shouting, that I've received for free and I can give. You know what I received for free? Salvation. And guess what? I can't give that out. Only Yeshua. That's what I got for free. Everything that I have gotten for free, I've gotten from my King. And there are things that I can't give to you. Everything that I've gotten free, I can't pass on. But the things that cost me, those I pass on. And yeah, I pretty much do it for free. And, you know, I sell a few copies of my books. But in Yeshua's society, the struggles that the teachers are having here, and I'm not saying that, I don't know their financial situation, but I'm talking about, you know, within our movement especially, that wouldn't have existed in the first century because people would have supported us if they had the means. They would have considered it unthinkable not to. And so, Matthew, it's your turn now.
I want to read, I'd like to read Paul's letters here. 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19. As for the rich in this present age, charm them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on uncertainty of riches, but on God, and who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, right? Not money, but good works. To be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for their future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. We talk about the weightier matters a lot in Scripture, and we love to talk about Matthew 25. It's a great chapter that has Yeshua dividing the sheep and the goats. And notice that he never divides the sheep and the goats based on Sabbath or based on feast days. He separates them based on their hospitality and how generous they are towards the people that are in need of something in their life. Guys, generosity is an attribute. Generosity is an attribute of a believer in Yeshua. We're supposed to be like Abraham, right? Abraham was hospitable. Okay? We look at all of the major characters, especially in the book of Luke, that Yeshua visits. You know, Levi the tax collector. What was the first thing he did for Yeshua? Come on, he was hospitable to Yeshua, and Yeshua said, yeah, this is how he's repenting, right? What about Zacchaeus? What was the first thing Zacchaeus did? Come, Yeshua, come into my house. I will give you all these things. He was showing Yeshua how generous he was and how hospitable he was to Yeshua, and that is how salvation came to him. Guys, Yeshua says, where your treasure is, so will your heart be. And that's a tough one because we come out of the church and we think like, oh, the church always wanted 10% of all of our income, so therefore we don't need to give nothing anymore because, you know, that's only for the temple, right? Guys, I still give 10% of my income to the fellowship that I go to. I guess you could call it tithing. I know it's not a tithe to the temple, but that's a scriptural shadowing. It's a scriptural pattern that I can't really do. I can't send 10% to the temple, but at least I can at least carry that forward and give an offering, a standard offering, back to my fellowship. You don't have to do that, and I'm not saying you do have to do that, but you need to have some form of generosity in your life. Because if not, you're going to harden up and you're going to be stingy, and it's not going to be a good characteristic of what Yeshua stood for. It's amazing how many people in Hebrew roots, we get so hardened up of generosity and compassion, and we just tighten up on anything comes to money. Ooh, if anyone ever asks for money, heaven forbid, you know. So the teachers put their heart and souls in these websites, and they charge a $5 a month fee to get in. Heaven forbid, they're all about the money. Really? Really, guys? Have we gone too far with that? Are we really sensationalizing this thing? I dare say that Hebrew Roots has taken a step back in the hospitality that Abraham tried to teach us and in the generosity that Yeshua tried to teach us. I mean, geez, go to compassion.com. Look at all the kids. You can support a kid for $38 a month. That would be something generous for you to do, but I dare say no one in Hebrew Roots does anything like that or even puts forth effort to do that because we like to store up our money. Guys, our money's no good here, right? And I hope we can pass the test called prosperity, because Yeshua approached several people that were truly blessed with riches on earth, and he told them, listen, guys, there's only one more test you need to do. Sell everything you own and be generous with it. I don't know. That's my one-liner for the night. I believe generosity is an attribute of a believer in Yeshua. I'll close with that.
Sounds good. I didn't tell you guys to talk about this stuff. That was a question that came in. Should we give? I try to stay away from anything that deals with asking for anything because, as you know, I have a website that is a members website. Oh boy, I get people getting all bent out of shape for $10 a year. $10 a year, and it's sad. But by the way, the information that we try to put out, we give away articles. We give away. By the way, the articles that I was giving away, you know how much money we were paying for them. And then you started school, so I was getting them for free. And then I started school, I was starting getting them for free. But each article that I have, can you grab that one in the bottom right there, N-A-N-E-C? Okay, you see all these articles that you see here? I know for a fact that I paid for these. Okay, you know how much each article was? $14. Between $9 and $14 for every single. There's 28 articles right here. 28 articles that I paid. Now you do the math. Okay, between eight to $14. And you know what I will do? I give them away to people. You know why I spend the money? Knowledge. Because I want to be edifying the body of Messiah with the research that I'm doing. And I like to think that you guys are, that's only one. That's only one binder. I have 4 over there. I would just happen to be blessed to buy a whole bunch, and then Ryan, I start studying with him, and he goes to school, so I was able to save a whole bunch more. So remember, I'm reading from Corinthians, and then we're done. I'm over my time already here. But I want to read from Corinthians something that I wish people would, would really understand. And 2 Corinthians 11, verse 7, says, "Did I commit sin by humbling myself so that you may be exalted because I proclaim the good news, God's good news, to you free of charge?" Do you know that when I travel, I don't have a fee? I don't have a fee anywhere. I show up, and I believe the Lord will provide. Somebody give a love offering. It could be 100 to whatever amount of money. There have been places that I go to, and I don't get anything. And I have to just say, well, blessed be the name of the great King for providing no matter what. He takes care of our needs. It says, verse 8, I robbed other churches by accepting support from them in order to serve you. And when I was with you, I was in need. I didn't burden anyone, but my needs were supplied by the first who came from Macedonia. Okay, so Paul is not trying to be of a burden. He's not asking, because you know why he's not asking? Because he knows who his patron is. So we are Israel, and in Israel you take care of the Levites. That was the duty of Israel, to take care of the Levites, right? Isn't that what the Bible says?
Absolutely.
So Israel is blessed. You take care of the Levites, and the Levites will take care of one another. Okay, so remember, giving has never stopped. It's just the way it's been abused. And the reason why I don't go around asking is because I came from a background of prosperity, and I saw this being abused. Okay? Being abused. So I stay away from being associated with that. But we have needs like anybody else. You have needs. You got to work extra shifts of work just to be able to go teach somewhere.
Yeah.
And because people, they don't necessarily want to join a website. Do you realize that for $100 a month, okay, you can join at least my website and get a lot more information than you would? That's why we make it easy and accessible. Hey, you can go to Walmart and $200 for stuff that you don't need, or go out to dinner 3 or 4 times a week, 3 or 4 times a month, spend all of that, but for our spiritual life, we don't invest. Anyway, I'm getting away from the topic. Thank you, Tyler, for bringing it up. But I just want to make sure that you know that the Father has been faithful. He is my patron. He takes care. He's my great King. He takes care for all of our needs. And I love to give a testimony that we have our needs met. And that's all we want, our needs met. I'm not looking for millions of dollars. I'm not looking to be a millionaire. I'm not looking to be famous. I just want to be a good servant of the King, and I want the needs to be met so I can continue to do the work the Father has called me to do. All right? Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Matthew, Tyler, and Ryan. I pray that every single one of you here enjoyed the questions and answer section. I thought it went well. We did our best to cover as much as we could per question, and I pray that maybe in the future we can do this again. We will not be together next week. We will be the week after. That will be, hold on, I'll tell you, that will be the 3rd of June. The reason why we can't do this every week, guys, because first we have a Torah portions we have to do. Ryan does the Haftorah. Matthew does his congregation. You know, he does teaching to get ready for he works. Tyler writes 1,000 books a week. You know, and she's quite busy all the time, and her hideout over there writing all the time. And sometimes we have a tough time. And if we're able to come back, we'd love to come back and every week. But for right now, we're going to have to do it every other week. I will be doing this on June 3rd, and then after that, we may have to hold it for a month because I'm going to be away. Maybe some of the guys can do it for us while I'm away. Thank you. Be blessed. We'll see you guys soon, and thank you for the opportunity to come to you and to share what we're learning. Remember, verify what we say. You don't have to believe what we say. Go and verify it, okay? Remember to test all things and let the Lord be everything in your life, and let Him be the honor, the glory, and all the praise. I'll see you next time.
Hey everybody. We still Tyler, you want to talk about something?
Are we still on?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh no.
Maybe. What you want to talk about? Compassion.com. That's a great website. Everyone go to that right now and check that out. Force yourself to be generous.
Compassion kids.
Yeah, force yourself to be generous. If you don't give money to nothing, give it to a little kid in Indonesia.
Oh my goodness.
I don't
Yeah,
think
I've got one in Ethiopia and one in Haiti.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I
been
was
supporting one since he was 8, the other since he was 6.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely
It's a good program. Are you sure we're on?
I saw a message here. Hold on, let me check. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it looks like the chat's still going.
And I just heard myself echo.
Yeah, I love
Of
it.
course.
Tyler, what's your website if people can go check out your books?
Oh, theancientbridge.com. What about your website, Matthew? What's your website?
Theancientbridge.com, ladies and gentlemen. Get your two books, right? You got 2 books?
Yeah.
2 awesome books that you can read yourself. It'll edify you, and you can give it to your Christian friends, and it's easy enough for them. Also, foundedintruth.com is our fellowship website, and you can visit the ministry's website that we post teachings from fellowship every week at facebook.com/foundedintruth. Yeah. Are we seriously still on? This is hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Are we? No way. Hold on, let me see here.
Well, we're the only 2 on at this point, and I don't know how to shut it off.
I think Ryan was in charge of it. Everybody,
Ryan was the first one to leave.
I know, this is absolutely awesome. Our video's not showing up, but we can do like a radio show like the Cup of She Brews does. This is good.
Can you hear the voices?
Yeah, I just heard your voice.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is awesome.
It's the Matthew and Tyler show.
I love it. You going to Revive, right?
Yeah, planning on it.
Everybody needs to come to
on it.
Only other place in the
Looking forward to
world.
meeting Jenny.
Oh yeah, Jenny's going to be there. Only place in the world where you can come together with 1,500 other like-minded believers. They might believe different calendars. They might believe different levels of Orthodox views, but they're all there, lovers, and they're all in fellowship with Yeshua, and we get to hang out with each other. It's awesome.
Maybe we should talk about whether Adam and Eve had belly buttons.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get off because I got stuff I need to get back to. So everyone, thanks for joining us here at Wisdom and Torah Talmudim broadcast.
oh yeah, Jesus is going to be there. Only place in the world where we can come together with 1,500 other like-minded believers. They might believe different calendars, they believe different levels of
Yeah, I don't know. It's still saying it's live and it's not giving me control now.